Ronald Gray has been on military death row for 37 years. His execution was authorized by a sitting president. It has never been carried out. He is still alive. Gray was a United States Army cook, a Specialist 4 assigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He wore the uniform. He served in the mess hall. He was described by people who worked alongside him as hard-working and unremarkable. Between April 1986 and January 1987, he murdered 4 women and raped at least 8. He was 21 years old when they arrested him. He is 59 years old today. This is who he was and what he did. If you follow cases where the system's failures are written into the official record, subscribe now. This channel covers them. This case has a 9-month gap in that record that cost a woman her life. Before we get to Ronald Gray, we start where this story starts, with the women. Linda Jean Coates was 23 years old. She was a student at Campbell University, a private Baptist-affiliated school in Beays Creek, North Carolina, roughly 30 miles from Fayetteville. She was a civilian. She was the first. Gray murdered her on April 27, 1986, and the public record of her individual life beyond that fact is sparse. Her civilian court proceedings are less extensively documented than the military court-martial that followed. What her family said after, whether they spoke publicly, is not in the available record. What we know is that she was 23, she was studying, and she was the first person Ronald Gray killed. Tammy Kofer Wilson was 18 years old. She lived at the Fairlane Acres Mobile Home Park off Santa Fe Drive in the Fayetteville area near Fort Bragg. She was a soldier's wife. She was among the youngest of Gray's victims. The same is true of her documented public record as of Coates. The civilian proceedings that established Gray's guilt in her murder are less extensively preserved in publicly available sources. She was 18 years old. That is what the record gives us. The absence itself is part of what this story is. Private Laura Lee Vickery Clay was also 18 years old. She was a United States Army soldier stationed at Fort Bragg. 2 witnesses saw her at a local Kmart on the evening of December 15, 1986, in the company of a man later identified as Ronald Gray. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Her car was found the following morning, a block from her home on the installation, driven into the woods. The driver's seat was set back farther than someone her size would need to drive it. 3 of Gray's fingerprints were on the hood. Her body was not found until January 17, 1987. More than a month after she disappeared in the woods on Fort Bragg. She had been raped, sodomized, and shot 4 times, in the neck, in the forehead, in the chest, and in the back of the head. She had also sustained blunt force trauma across multiple parts of her body. She was 18 years old. Kimberly Ann Bowman Ruggles was 23 years old. She was originally from Seneca Falls, New York. She was working as a cab driver for Terminal City Cab Company in Fayetteville, running fares on and near Fort Bragg. She was a mother of 3 children. Her father, Edward Bowman, has spent more than 3 decades attending appellate hearings, giving interviews, and waiting. In 2017, on the 30th anniversary of his daughter's murder, he told a local news outlet, "If I have to live to be 100 years old to get it done, that's what I'll do." In 2015, he said, "I'm afraid I'll go before he does." Edward Bowman has been the most publicly documented voice for the victims of Ronald Gray for longer than some of his daughter's children have been alive. Private Mary Ann Lang Namath was 20 years old and stationed at Fort Bragg when Ronald Gray entered her barracks room on January 3, 1987. He raped her. He stabbed her in the throat. He tied her hands behind her back with an electrical cord and gagged her. He told her, as she later testified from the witness stand, not to cry for help as he left. She survived. She testified at his court-martial. She identified him in court. She was present in the courtroom when the jury returned its verdict. The specific long-term consequences of what was done to her are not documented in the available public record, which is its own kind of statement. Ronald Adrian Gray was born August 14, 1965, in Cochran, Georgia. He grew up in Liberty City, a public housing project in Miami, Florida. His childhood, documented in mitigation testimony at his 1988 court-martial, was marked by severe poverty, domestic instability, frequent moves, and periods without electricity. A military forensic psychiatrist, Colonel David Armitage, testified that Gray's stepfather was extremely abusive toward both Gray's mother and Gray himself, using belts on him to the point of drawing blood. A family friend, Lisa Howard, documented in legal filings that sex workers operated on the corner immediately adjacent to the family home. This testimony was entered as mitigation. It does not change what he did. It is part of the documented record. Gray enlisted in the United States Army in 1984 at age 18. He was assigned initially to Target Acquisition Battery, 1-39 Field Artillery, then reassigned to Fort Bragg in April 1986, where he worked as a cook for the 18th Airborne Corps Artillery. He held the rank of Specialist 4, E4. His colleagues described him as hard-working and unremarkable. The prosecution at his court-martial called him cold and calculating. Both characterizations can be true of the same person. That is precisely the problem. There is no documented record of any pre-arrest red flag in Ronald Gray's military file. No formal complaints, no disciplinary actions, no behavioral deterioration noted by supervisors. Prior to trial, 2 psychiatrists and a psychologist individually examined him. Prior to his first murder, none of that evaluation infrastructure was pointed at him at all. The Army had no documented forewarning. His enlistment screening outcome is not described in available public records. The institutional failure in this case is not individual. No single supervisor had specific forewarning and looked the other way. The failure is structural, and it is investigative, and it cost at least one life that might have been saved. Gray murdered Linda Jean Coates on April 27, 1986. That is where the 9 months start. Over the months that followed, through December 1986 and into January 1987, Gray committed multiple attacks in the Fayetteville area and on Fort Bragg itself, targeting both civilians and soldiers. The critical failure is this: military investigators and civilian law enforcement did not connect these crimes to a single perpetrator until January 1987. They did not identify that the man who killed a Campbell University student in April was the same man attacking women on and near the installation through the winter. Whether formal interagency communication protocols existed, and whether they were followed or failed, is not documented in available public sources. That record has not been made public. What the public record does show is 9 months, multiple attacks, multiple jurisdictions, and no connection made until it was too late for Kimberly Ruggles. Congress subsequently changed military justice rules to require 12 jurors in courts martial. Gray's panel had 6. Congress also subsequently established that defendants must be guaranteed the right to present mitigating evidence at sentencing. Both of these changes post-dated Gray's trial and became the basis for appellate challenges. The structural gaps in military law were documented after the fact. They were not there to protect anyone in 1987 or 1988. In November 1986, Gray stole a .22 caliber pistol. That theft is confirmed in his own confession and in the court record. He stole it before the December murders began. He used it to kill Laura Lee Vickery Clay. The prosecution at court-martial described Gray as a cold and calculating killer who picked his targets and then brutalized and killed them. The forensic evidence supports that characterization: the stolen weapon, the specific victims, the cab he called in, requesting a particular driver. On December 11, 1986, Gray abducted, raped, and murdered Tammy Kofer Wilson in the Fayetteville area. She was 18 years old. 4 days later, on December 15, 1986, he encountered Private Laura Lee Vickery Clay. 2 witnesses placed them together at a Kmart that evening. He took her from there. He drove her car into the woods on Fort Bragg. The driver's seat pushed back for his frame, not hers. He raped her. He sodomized her. He shot her 4 times, in the neck, the forehead, the chest, and the back of the head. He also beat her across multiple parts of her body. The .22 caliber pistol he had stolen the previous month was recovered in those woods, approximately 60 feet from where her body was eventually found. Her body was not found until January 17, 1987. A soldier found her, decomposed, in the Fort Bragg woods, more than a month after she disappeared. On January 3, 1987, Gray entered the Fort Bragg barracks room of Private Mary Ann Lang Namath. He raped her. He stabbed her in the throat. He bound her hands behind her back with an electrical cord. He gagged her. He told her not to cry for help. Then he left. She survived. She survived because she was still alive when someone found her. On January 6, 1987, Gray called Terminal City Cab Company. According to local press reporting, he personally requested Kimberly Ruggles by name, a driver he knew from previous fares. That specific claim, that he requested her by name, appears in local press accounts but is not confirmed in available appellate court documents. What is confirmed, she was dispatched for a pickup off Santa Fe Drive, the area around Gray's residence at Fairlane Acres. In the early hours of January 7th, military police on routine patrol, not a targeted search, found Ruggles' empty cab at the edge of the woods on Fort Bragg. Her nude body was found a short distance away. Gray had stabbed her 7 times. He had raped her. He had sodomized her. He had beaten her. Her mouth was gagged with a cloth belt that matched a pair of black karate pants found in Gray's possession within hours of the discovery. Gray's fingerprints were on the interior door handle of her taxi. Ruggles' fingerprints were found on money in Gray's possession. His footprints were at the scene. The Army had already made travel arrangements for Edward Bowman to attend the execution when the stay was issued, 14 days before the scheduled date. "They had made arrangements for me and everything," he said afterward. "The cloth belt, the fingerprints, the footprints, the matching karate pants found on Gray hours after Ruggles' body was discovered. The physical evidence assembled quickly. Gray was arrested in January 1987, initially in connection with a separate rape near Fairlane Acres. The evidence from Ruggles' murder connected to him within the same investigative period. Fingerprint evidence from Vickery Clay's car, combined with the Kmart witnesses who placed Gray with her on the night she disappeared, built the military charges. Gray confessed to stealing the .22 caliber pistol used to kill Vickery Clay. The earlier murders of Coates and Wilson were established through guilty pleas in civilian court. He was 21 years old at the time of his arrest. Gray appeared first in North Carolina civilian court. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of Linda Jean Coates and Tammy Kofer Wilson. He also pleaded guilty to 5 counts of first-degree rape, 5 counts of first-degree sexual offense, 1 count of attempted first-degree rape, 3 counts of second-degree kidnapping, 2 counts of robbery with a dangerous weapon, 2 counts of first-degree burglary, and multiple assault charges. He was sentenced to 8 life terms, 3 consecutive and 5 concurrent. His general court-martial at Fort Bragg ran from December 1987 through April 1988. The charges covered the murders of Laura Lee Vickery Clay and Kimberly Ruggles, the attempted murder of Mary Ann Lang Namath, 3 rapes, 2 counts of forcible sodomy, 2 robberies, burglary, and larceny. Sources placed the total charge count at either 12 or 14. The contemporaneous court report states 14. A subsequent appellate opinion cites 12. The original court record is the authoritative source. The script uses multiple charges accordingly. The panel was composed of 3 officers and 3 enlisted soldiers, 6 members. Congress would later require 12. The prosecution's physical evidence was substantial. 3 fingerprints on the hood of Vickery Clay's car. The stolen .22 caliber pistol, recovered 60 feet from her body. The cloth belt gag physically matching Gray's black karate pants. Fingerprints on the interior door handle of Ruggles' cab. Ruggles' fingerprints on money in Gray's possession. Gray's footprints at the scene. 2 Kmart witnesses who placed him with Vickery Clay on the evening she disappeared. And Mary Ann Lang Namath. She testified. She pointed to Ronald Gray from the witness stand and identified him as the man who raped her, stabbed her, bound her, and left her. Army Prosecutor Major C. Douglas Goins addressed the panel directly. "You don't stab someone 3 times in the neck and once in the side, leave them tied up and gagged and expect them to live. It doesn't make sense." He called Gray a calculating murderer who coldly and carefully chose victims to rape, rob, and kill. The defense argued that while the evidence placed Gray in a bad light, much of it was circumstantial. No witness directly observed the killings. The defense also presented mitigation. Gray's mother, his sister, and Colonel Armitage testified to the childhood of poverty, domestic violence, and the abusive stepfather. 2 additional psychiatrists and further mental testing results were submitted. The panel deliberated for 3 hours on April 6, 1988, then resumed the following morning and returned its verdict at 3:30 p.m. on April the 7th. Guilty on all charges, unanimous. 5 days later, on April 12, 1988, the panel sentenced Ronald Gray to death. unanimous. He was also dishonorably discharged, ordered to forfeit all pay and allowances, and reduced in rank to Private E1. He was 22 years old. On July 29, 1988, the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division approved the sentence. Under military law, presidential approval is required before execution can proceed. That approval did not come for 20 years. The appellate timeline in this case is long enough to constitute its own document. The Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces issued an opinion in 1999. The U.S. Supreme Court denied certiorari in approximately 2001. Around 2005, the Secretary of the Army recommended presidential approval to the Bush administration. On July 28, 2008, President George W. Bush authorized the execution. It was the first presidential authorization of a military execution in more than 50 years. White House Press Secretary Dana Perino stated, "The President believes the facts of this case leave no doubt that the sentence is just and warranted." The Army Secretary set the date. Lethal injection. December 10, 2008. Edward Bowman was given travel arrangements to attend. On November 26, 2008, 14 days before the scheduled execution, U.S. District Judge Richard Rogers issued a stay. Gray's attorneys had argued ineffective assistance of counsel at the original court-martial, that Gray lacked mental competency to stand trial, that the post-conviction congressional changes to jury size and mandatory mitigation evidence rules should apply retroactively, and that military courts lacked jurisdiction to prosecute him. The DOJ filed to have the stay reconsidered. The request was denied. Gray's mental incompetency argument was unanimously rejected by the Army Court of Criminal Appeals in January 2012. The Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces unanimously rejected his petition in November 2017. The U.S. Supreme Court denied certiorari on June 28, 2018, without stated reasons. All major appellate avenues have been exhausted. In late 2016, U.S. District Judge J. Thomas Martin lifted the 2008 stay. Execution proceedings could resume once military appeals were exhausted. Those appeals have now been exhausted. No new execution date has been set. Ronald Gray remains on death row at the United States Disciplinary Barracks in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He is one of 4 men on U.S. military death row. The U.S. military has not carried out an execution since 1961. President Biden's December 2024 commutations applied only to federal civilian prisoners. They did not affect military death row. Gray's execution, under the existing 2008 presidential authorization, remains technically the only one in modern military death row history to have received that authorization. Whether the Trump administration will formally reauthorize or schedule the execution has not been publicly announced as of the available record. A Change.org petition calling on President Trump to order the execution was active in April 2025. Edward Bowman, Kimberly Ruggles' father, attended a 2015 appellate hearing in person. After the session, a judge approached Bowman and the parents of another victim and thanked them for their determination. Bowman told a reporter, "This has been going on way too long." He is right that it has been a long time. Linda Jean Coates, 23, student. Tammy Kofer Wilson, 18, soldier's wife. Laura Lee Vickery Clay, 18, private, United States Army, whose body was found decomposed in the woods of the installation she served. Kimberly Ruggles, 23, cab driver, mother of 3, from Seneca Falls, New York, whose father has now spent more than half his life waiting. Mary Ann Lang Namath, who survived and testified, and then walked back out into a world that moved on. Their names are in the court record. Their deaths and their injuries are documented facts. The system that could not connect 4 attacks to one perpetrator for 9 months is documented. What remains is that no new date has been set, and Edward Bowman is still waiting. Gray's execution was authorized under one president and blocked 2 weeks before it happened. A new administration has not formally reauthorized it. Here is the question worth putting in the comments. Should a new president be required to formally reauthorize an already approved military execution, or does the original order stand? Drop your position below. Subscribe if you want to follow the cases that don't go away, the ones where the families are still showing up to courtrooms decades later. If this case raised questions for you, those questions belong in the comments.